I just wanted to touch on the entrepreneurial spirit because I think that was the thing that attracted me the most about the whole thing is that you just, it's almost like every business owner is like, we would never start anything if we had all the cash to do it. It's like we always have to cash flow those emotions through most builds and most businesses. But where do you think that comes from in you? Like, when do you think that you do you tap into that when you were young and just started trading from a young age? Or, what you've obviously been super successful, made millions upon millions. And, to get to a point where you can risk effectively, I would say to Charlotte, my wife, like, I would feel comfortable, maybe spending 10-20% of our net worth on a gamble, to do something that could work. And I just was interested in if you've ever tapped into like, what's actually made you so successful through your career, and then we'll touch on your businesses and stuff.
Yeah. I think I wasn't expecting to do it as much on the castle we ended up doing. So obviously, the intention wasn't to do all, loads of it. I mean, ultimately, I sort of don't use money as a measure in terms of, for me, I sort of see it a bit like energy. It's like it's one of those things that comes and goes, and the more I hold on to it, the less or it runs away. I'm a big believer in sort of you speculate and you accumulate, and that sort of thing. And I think money makes stuff happen, so it's great to have it, but also other people's money helps you can get done as well. So that works really well. But I mean, from a young age, I was super interested in business. Just buying, selling stuff, making a profit. I had my first company when I was 15. I was a little bit dyslexic, struggled at school, hated school really. But I used to get on the train at 15 and go up to London, and I used to have customers and fix their computers. And, I literally didn't know what I was doing. I just sort of read up, on the train up what the customer wanted me to do, and I'd pretend on the job that I knew what I was doing. And so I sort of started business that way. My 4-year-old, when she was little on the beach, started selling her toys to people on the beach without any prompting from me. So I'm like, I think there's something in the blood,
Yeah.
a bit of sort of entrepreneurial spirit. But for many years, I really hated the title entrepreneur, because I sort of felt a little bit like a fraud, because I'm like, I'm unemployable, so I'm trying to find a way through life that I can sort of make a living.
That's entrepreneur. That's what it means. I'm fucking unemployable, so I got to figure it out.
I just think, the words loosely used around people who don't actually understand. They just don't want to lose a job, or they feel like they're entrepreneur. But yeah, exactly. It's a graft, isn't it? It's every day trying to make tomorrow better than today, and that's what entrepreneur is.
Yeah, I mean, I work for an IT company, and I mean, I've got mates there who are there and been there for like 20 years. But I was just like, I can't. Anyway, I mean, I left that really well-paying job, went and sat in my bedroom for 4 years, built this telecoms business, sold it back to actually one of my company's competitors, and then ended up having the conversation at like chairman, CEO level. And I literally like jumped the whole organization, whereas I could have still been an account manager in that business, where now I was like, because I had the credibility of building something, creating something, employing people, going through those challenges. And that sort of became my CV. And I sort of just kept doing that, really.
Just quickly to touch on the entrepreneurialism and disliking that word. There was actually, I think it was Harvard, an assessment done on the common characteristics of business owners across the world, and there was 3 main factors. One was that as a child or in early years, the person that set up the business had some form of learning difficulty or educational difficulty, so they adapted. And Piers, exactly like you, I'm dyslexic. My dad can't even read or write, and he's a business owner and a successful one as well. Still can't read or write, which is pretty crazy when he's eating in a restaurant and you have to read it to him. The second is actually, and I don't think we need to unpack this one, is childhood trauma. So the independence that's built from a very young age fosters growth and success in a business. And the third, so I definitely know your 1 and 3, same as me, is typically when parents are entrepreneurial, or they're doing something like flipping houses, like you said, and living on the taking a credit card, adding value to an asset, and then materializing that cost and going to the next project, compounding that experience, capital, equity, which is really, and they were the 3 top similarities across the world for business owners.
Let me tether on from that, and then I'll throw it back to you, Piers, because I actually think you kind of get, as business owners and entrepreneurs, like, not to try and distort the meanings too much, but some people, particularly in tech nowadays, they're not really an entrepreneur, but they might have just, because software development or because of some engineering feat, they create just a great product. They could get the money super quick, and they just end up becoming this sort of accidental business owner that makes billions. And you can think of quite a few scenarios in tech where I wouldn't say they are entrepreneurial, because they don't sort of tick those boxes that Jack was just talking about, where I think entrepreneur is really a lifestyle choice, generally from a young age, where someone goes, I'm unemployable, I'm disruptive, I can't really listen to authority, I've got to bite my own bullet and live life on my own terms. I don't think all business owners necessarily have that. Some do just have a great product or service that they could monetize because of some domain expertise. But I do think that side of the world is kind of disappearing. I think the entrepreneur is coming back, where you've really got to, in this landscape, in this environment, you've got to be able to like tread your own path and craft something that you can build. And then speaking to what you're sort of doing now, you mentioned how you didn't really have a commercial mindset building the castle, which I think fair to say, it's just a big sort of gamble to build that thing. But am I right in saying that you're now using a commercial mindset with it and going, I've got all this attention, I've got all this audience, this scarce resource of audience attention. I'm now going to monetize the thing that I couldn't monetize before, and that attention for sales and marketing, right? To build like home tech and smart tech and things like that. Am I right in saying that? And then could you sort of double down on your thinking there on how to leverage this thing that, it's call it a disaster. You're taking something that went bad and going, how can I make the most of it? How can I use the Grand Designs platform, use the clout of the castle, and then actually turn that into an upside, which again is quite an entrepreneurial thing to do.
Yeah, so I'll go back. So just on the trauma bit, I think I had a great upbringing, um, but both me and my wife, we both suffered from bullying at school, and I think that was sort of the trauma element. And I think it was really interesting because when you have kids, I mean, you guys were way too young, but we were. But when we had,
got
it's
a
like
few
we had the
sprogs
chat.
between us.
We sort of my wife and I were like, how do we get our children to have discomfort and challenge, whether that's at school or whether that's anywhere, in a way that we're not masochists. We don't want them to be hurt or upset, but at the same time, we want them to feel a bit of pressure and stress, and because that will make them self-reliant, better people. So just going back to your point, I think that's super important. I think, in terms of sort of turning a failure into a positive. I mean, when I used to mentor, I've sort of had quite a few people I've sort of mentored over time. My old school used to invite me back to come and talk to the kids, and then after a few years, they stopped inviting me. And I said, why am I not allowed back? They said, well, we just have some complaints from the parents. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, all the kids who come to your sort of session, they go away and then they're like, right, I'm not going to school anymore. I'm going to start a business. I'm not going to go to university. And all these parents are like, we're paying all this money for you to go to school, and you're not going to become a police officer or an accountant or a lawyer. You now think you're going to do this other stuff. So, I think that's sort of that's where I sort of put that focus. But I think in terms of turning the castle round, when I mentor people, I talk about like a 15-year goal. And it's really interesting when you talk to people, you say, right, what's your 5-year plan? Like loads of people. And I think this is probably where I would define an entrepreneur is I think in things of 15 years. So when I was 15 years old, I stood in front of my mirror and I said, I don't want to be arguing about money when I'm 30. I don't want to, I want to be independent, whatever it was. I think I was 32 and I'd sort of sold my business, made more money than most people ever get to see. And then obviously then I decided, right, when I'm 45, I want to achieve this goal. I've got 1 year to go on getting there. I think I might overrun by a few years. But it is a very personal thing. Whatever that goal is, you sort of set it. But I'm a big believer, if you set that big goal, then all those humps and bumps in the meantime, you sort of look past it. And what you're looking at is that finished, so whether it's dominating the world and taking over the whole of Britain with the map or whatever it is, it's the big goal, it's the big vision. And then you can take all the pros and the negatives as you go along. And I think, when I started the castle, my ambition with that was like, we build, and I'm not taking you guys at all in this, but on the majority of the big house builders in the UK, we build shit homes.
Yeah.
We build cheap, quick.
Don't worry, we agree.
Yeah,
Right, okay. We build crappy homes, and I just thought, if I could build one of the biggest houses in the country, and actually deploy all the latest technology into it, because one of the things I did when I started researching it was like, someone talked to me about triple glazing. I'm like, okay, well, what difference does that make to my house? What is the impact? And they're like, oh, well, it depends on what your, thermal bridging is, what your wall U value is, and it's like, yeah, but give me, and you get all these calcs and everything, and people like give you your SAP tests. We built a house next door to the castle as our test bed. I think Grand Designs gave it like 5 seconds of airtime. The forecasted EPC for that was a low B. We scored 100 out of 100 on that EPC without pretty much trying.
They didn't say that on Grand Designs.
Exactly. And what it became was, I was like, right, so all that tech works. So all that tech has gone into the castle. So things like the wood creep blocks, the triple glazing, the solar glass, massive. We're south facing on a hill. In the summer, this office got to like 55 degrees just because it acts like a greenhouse. So putting solar glass on and maintaining that constant temperature, air conditioning, how do you make that affordable? Change state hot water boilers, loads of stuff, batteries, solar, wind, all those things, and so all that tech has gone into the castle. And what's happened is that I've actually had some of the biggest house builders come up and see it now and actually look at it and go, oh, okay, I can see how it fits. And now if you condense that down into a 3-bedroom semi, actually the cost drops dramatically. But in the same way that, I'm a massive car nut, the S-Class Mercedes used to always be the pinnacle of tech. It was the first car to have ABS. It was the first car, every car has ABS now. And you need that pinnacle to go, if I can make a castle zero bill and like the most efficient building, fuck what it cost, but I can demonstrate all that tech working in harmony together in a way that actually you can then go, right, this is how we need to build, envy.
Like a prototype.
Exactly.
You just done a £7 million marketing prop to basically showcase the business model. Love it.
The coverage of Grand Designs is worth about 5 million in advertising. So I was like, that's how I offset the thing in my head.
Just coming back on those points, because it's funny, when you was talking, I pulled up the actual definition of entrepreneur. And apparently Irish-French economist Richard Cantillon in 1755 first defined the term in a modern economic context, describing an entrepreneur as a risk taker who pays certain costs for an uncertain return. And I think that's definitely sums you up, us up as well, but definitely yourself. So I think you are 100% entrepreneur, and I also agree with what Jack says, well, and yourself. And so me and my wife have recently set up a charity specifically, which my business pledges to. It's all about promoting enterprise throughout children across schools, because at the moment, obviously starting in Wales, because they just don't do anything in the curriculum, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. But that's kind of a separate personal mission of mine. And then the other bit I want to come on to, because us as well as business owners, we battle cash every day, especially in this sector. And the one thing that Grand Designs was showing is your constant battling, challenging with cash. And these are a few points I wrote down. You had to sell the house you were in, the barn. You had to sell your London flat. You had to sell all your assets, as you said before. The test house you sold, they only aired it, and the only thing they highlighted on it was the fact you sold it for 2.5 million to put into the building, rather than anything else. You had to borrow money from your mum, because they showed that on there. And the at one point, your flat sale was going through the same month. You had to pay bills, and if it didn't complete, how are you going to pay the bills? Your banks basically rejected your applications for funding, so it said on there, and then you also had to resort to private investors. It said on there. I mean, can you just we battle cash constantly, and it's one of the warnings we always say to people getting into property development, that if it goes wrong, cash will kill you. How did you deal with that mentally? What what did you do to overcome that and still probably now cash drain?
I think high insight, I should have borrowed more money earlier. And I think that the thing is, people lend you money when you have money. It's a ridiculous thing. It's like, when you've got a successful business, suddenly everyone rocks up and they're like, oh, can I lend you some money? And you're like, no, I don't need it. And why would I pay you interest on money I don't need now? But when you need money and you don't have it, no one lends it to you because they're like, that's the thing. So I think, I went into this with sort of cash in my war chest so I could do, but literally once I'd burned through that, I was like, oh shit, now I need money. And so I had to then start unpicking like how I do that. And I think the thing about, a build, or building a business is you have run rate. So you have cash flow going out every month. And I think, the castle sort of has gone between 100K a month to sort of 250 a month. And that's really hard. I mean, I haven't taken a salary in 5 years. So I am literally like, and in the startup world, you don't, because you are building things and then you take it later and you benefit from your shares or your equity, whatever, later on. So I mean, it's just a continuous uphill struggle. And I think you network well. And I think it's also about, as a family, we've always sort of like, if I've had it, I've given it, and vice versa. Friends and family sort of, there are certain friends I can lean on. There are other friends I can't lean on. And vice versa, probably, who would lean on me to support them.
Just real quickly on the borrowing money, all of us on this call have borrowed money from commercial investors and to deliver our businesses where we are. That's very much fundamental part of our business. Do you find sometimes I would find it difficult to ask the near friends and family for money, just from like almost like an ego perspective?
Right.
How did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think I'm more concerned about making sure that they don't feel obliged and that they could just say no without feeling embarrassed. So I'm not worried about asking, because ultimately, again, I'm only on this world for a short period of time. Don't really give a shit what people think of me. I'll leave a legacy of whatever I've done behind me, and people can then judge it later.
Yeah.
I think in terms of asking friends and family is tough. But I think it's not something that happens overnight. And I think it's that thing of, whether it's someone who, needed a bung because they're in between jobs and they just needed some help to get them through that, or whether they needed, a deposit for a house or whatever it was. I like to think that I'm there and I support people as and when they need it, and vice versa. I think ultimately it comes down to your ability and your, everyone views risk, don't they? And they sort of look at it. So it's like whether you're a good bet or not, and if, I'm not out snorting stuff up my nose every day. So I sort of think people think, okay, Piers is going to do.
He's low on the risk curve, but he does love to go get smashed on a Friday.
And I might get my money back. So it's really tough. It's not easy. And I think, had we, in America, I just feel like those conversations are much easier to have, because people
I completely agree with that.
They celebrate success. They talk about, the challenges. Realistically in America, you're not a good businessman until you've had 3 or 4 failures anyway.
Yeah, so I was going to say I'm married to an American, and I just reflect back. We went out to dinner with a family and an 11-year-old daughter. We were talking about someone in a conversation that was a business owner, and the 11-year-old daughter said, "What does this business do, numbers wise?" And I was like, "I fucking love that." And I was like, "You just do not get that in England." And her dad continued to say, "He turns over about 4 million quid. He's had a few tough years. I don't think he's made any profit. These are the reasons that he hasn't made a profit. And, I don't think he's going to see out the decade." And I was just like, you point at one 11-year-old. Obviously, there are some kids from the ground up leaders that it's just not modern day, that the attitude is that way, that you can ask those questions. I love asking people, what do you turn over, what's your profit margin, how do you generate business, what's your cost per acquisition? And that's why we're all weirdos and we get up at 6:30 a.m. every Friday and have a chat.
Cultural thing, isn't it? We've made money a bit of a taboo topic in this country because we're quite private and proper, and I do think it is a massive. It worked for a time, but it's now very much a disadvantage because the younger generation just can't they can't resonate.
My theory is, if you look at our generation that grew us up, the generation above that came out of the war, the depression, rations. The country was very frugal for decades, and that's been installed in 2 generations above us, which is then followed down into the generation above us. The Americans just pumped everything with energy and optimism, and I'll buy, I'll sell, and the US is the highest level of consumer debt in the world. So not only are they just earning money, they're spending it like you wouldn't believe, and that's why the economy just spirals and grows.
Coming back to that, there's actually a piece of science around the fact that we've always been constrained. So if you think about the size of our country, we are limited by our borders. We only have so much space. If you guys got into the Yellowstone series and
so good,
and the prequels to that were amazing, but it was that whole concept of like land. You just went out and found land. There was, and it's still the case today. There is no constraint to expansion in America. So consumption is almost endless. There is plentiful everything, and I don't know, plentiful oil as well, or whatever the other stuff is. But we've always been constrained, and you're absolutely right. That is the mindset of us, is that we think about what we don't have and what we can't have, rather than the possibility of having something. And I think I'm much more American, I think, in my outlook. And I also work in sales, and sales is very much, you talk about your numbers every day, and that's, you're not embarrassed about it. It's not something, you shy away from. And amazing, that person's making loads of money. Great, good for them. I want to do that. How do I do it? How do I go and have a chat with them, learn from them, find out? I'll do it myself.
That was the fundamental reason why we sort of set the ground up, is that we're all different. We're all over the country. We're doing different strategies, working on different businesses, but it's quite a lonely road when you're an entrepreneur, or when you're a business owner. And to be around other like-minded people who do support each other, to go with challenges and to work on 2 or 3 solutions with other like-minded people, it's almost like therapy that we do this every week. Really, we just document it and stick it on YouTube for the world to listen to as well. So